Everybody, we are officially live. I'm so excited to dive into another pre-symposium panel. The pre-symposium panel is the lead up to our executive symposium on December 4th in the DFW area, where we will be talking about how to drive strategic change in an organization. So, what the pre-symposium panel is, it's the gathering of executives and leaders who are going to be at the event in a month to share their thoughts, their insights, their perspective on what they found to be effective for driving strategic change in an organization, and maybe pitfalls that they've encountered along the way, because ultimately, pitfalls are a great way to derive learning lessons from how to go about successfully achieving this change that we need within our businesses. We've got three great leaders here with us today. We got Debra, we got Frank, and we got Ben. Debra, do you mind introducing yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Garrett. Thanks for having us today, too. I'm Debra Squyres. I'm the founder and CEO of Squyres and Company. We help customer success organizations in growth companies or companies that want to get back to growth unlock their full potential and really become predictable revenue engines. So transformation and change is a part of our day to day.
I love it. Frank, how about you?
Thank you, Garrett. Thanks for having us today. Great conversation. My name is Frank Trampert. I'm a global executive in the technology and travel space, hospitality and travel space. I just assisted Sabre in successfully transitioning one of its business unit, Hospitality Solution, to a private equity company. And you can imagine lots of change over 12 months. And so this is a fantastic topic. Looking forward to contribute.
Amazing. And then Ben, how about you?
Yeah, I'm the CEO of Particle 41, and we are a software development consultancy that has launched over 94 products. And we love helping clients with data and AI initiatives and AI transformation.
Beautiful. And I'm Garrett Mintz. I'm the founder of Ambition in Motion. At Ambition in Motion, our vision is a world where the vast majority of people are excited to go to work. When they're there, their expectations meet reality. And when they come home, they feel fulfilled. And we believe that starts with leaders, because leaders create the experiences employees have while at work. And so we create technologies and communities to empower leaders to be their best selves for their teams. And one of the ways that we build community is through executive symposiums. So let's dive in. Topic for today: how to drive strategic change in an organization. And so for the audience who are tuning in and watching this now, I was chatting with my fellow panelists today, or right before this, about how some of the biggest hurdles to driving a strategic change in an organization are the existing incumbent team members on the team. And one of the things that I find oftentimes occurs or exists is there'll be people who, to your face, to the leadership team, to the executive team who created the strategy or the change or whatever's going on, to your face will be like, oh yeah, boss, I'm on board. I got this. We're going to go do it to the future and beyond. And in reality, they go back and do nothing, changed, nothing different. They revert back to old habits. And, it's this weird kind of song and dance back and forth where you're like, maybe they're not understanding. Are they intentionally not buying in? Trying to come to the bottom of, like, where did I as an executive go wrong in the communication of this change that we clearly all agreed on was needed, because somewhere along the lines it wasn't bought into. So I would love to kick off with an initial question. What have you found to be an effective way to not necessarily get the buy-in, but understand when you've communicated if it has or has not been effectively received by the individuals you're communicating this change to? Like, is there a litmus test? Is there something you use to gauge whether or not this message you've communicated and they've told you to your face, like, oh yeah, I'm on board, like that they actually are on board? Or, maybe you need to iterate or, address the way that it's been communicated and touched on. So who wants to go first?
I'll jump in.
Jump in.
I think oftentimes as leaders, we broadcast and we may do some communication, but we don't actually do the work to make sure that people understand what is expected of the change, have the conversations with the right people to ensure that the change resonates on the front lines, and that you're taking that feedback loop back into account so that you can adjust as you need to over time. One of the best ways to make sure that you get it as close to right as possible is involving the people closest to the change in designing that. And then they can become your change champions, but they're also a great source of feedback. But I think the proof is in the behavior. Oftentimes, though, we blame others for not picking up the behavior when we haven't done our part as leaders and going well beyond just broadcasting that the change is happening and expecting people to fall in line.
Yeah, I also think there's this don't manage to a non-event, right? When you're going to make change, things are going to go wrong. And so there's this, I don't know, this allure to say, oh yeah, this is going to go perfectly. We're going to knock this out. And then, we're managing to a non-event. And I prefer to say, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to, and as we get closer to our goal, it's going to get messy and we'll have to have good reaction. So we can be as proactive as possible, but as we're really making the change, we're going to break some eggs. And we just have to be ready for that and ready to respond and react to the bumps that are going to happen as a result of the change. Because managing to a non-event is kind of a form of professional lying, right? We're just telling people what they want to hear, and then when it goes sideways, we're exposed. So I prefer not to manage to a non-event and start looking for leading success indicators, so that we can start to celebrate some smaller wins, rather than only hang my hat on the end result.
Yeah, those are excellent points. I think I sort of look at this situation around the effects it has on the people, right? So when I drive change, if it is self-imposed, meaning I have created a new strategy, or if it is infused from the outside, like an acquisition as an example, right? Still self-infused, but still different dynamics. Change is scary. It's disruptive. There's a difference that happens. There's uncertainty, and I have found that people would love to be brought along the journey, and they require transparency. But you have to strike that balance, I think, between the strategy itself. So it's an event that is going to happen. It is fairly certain. There is the leadership perspective and the drive, either from the board or external factors to move on with that strategy. But then there's the organizational realities, right? The behavior, the way how you execute, or always have been executing. So it's less about, for me, the brilliance of the strategy itself. It's more around how it translates into the organization and how it sort of coordinates and relates to the daily rhythm and the behavior of the people. And I think my first point to that is, how do you do that really well? It is through explaining why we're doing things, really putting it into perspective. Why are we doing this change in strategy? What is happening to us? What's behind it? What problem are we trying to solve? And what does the future potentially holds for us? What's the North Star? So that's how I think about that.
This is interesting. I'd be curious, do y'all have any stories that you like to share, both for positive or for learning lesson reasons of where like, okay, we tried it this way and it blew up in our face, or we tried it this way and it totally worked. Like, I don't know. I love to dive into the story time if there's one that comes to mind. If not, I've got one that I'm thinking of right now, but
I'm happy to kick that off, and it's because it's super recent, right? So transition through acquisition is it starts with what are we going to be called? Is like, are we going to get a new boss? I mean, what's the future going to look like? Where are we going to go? And I have found that the communication behind it and the frequency and the transparency, and also not going alone, by having partners, transitional leaders, change leaders in the organization, like-minded people who believe in the vision, who sort of are a little bit more closer to the strategy, but also have let's call it sort of a mid-management position, who are very closely connected to the customer, to the people, to create a small team that drives that decision in the organization. Point number one. Point number two, no matter how much you communicate, they still have the same worries. And sometimes it's really hard to say, like, well, I've communicated now every day 3 times, or we have this weekly phone call. Uncertainty for people is a difficult thing to digest. And no matter how much you try to over communicate, there is still sort of a residual effect of that, or a belief of that. And you just have, as a leader, you have to accept that, and you have to drive through that. But you do that by being approachable, by being accessible, and to just continuously, frequently communicate the vision and how you progress.
Yeah, there's a book called The Seven Primal Questions by Mike Foster. And what it explains is that there's, people have one of these seven primal questions, and one of them am I safe? Mine, I'm like a Q5 guy, and it's am I successful, right? But this is a really easy assessment that they have online, that you can find out which primal question your teammates have. And what you just described, Frank, is that if they're a Q2 person, if they're an am I safe person, they if there's any change, they may feel unsafe. And then what the 7 primal questions describes is that if we're getting a no to our primal question, then we go into a scramble. And so people who are really attached primally to safety are going to scramble in the midst of change. And so some layer of coaching to help them with that, and some of that communication for my Q2 folks. I have to over communicate and really help them kind of see ahead and around corners so that they realize that this is happening for them, not to them. And yeah, they can kind of sit in that scramble if we haven't addressed those safety. And that's just something that it may not be within their capability to change that. We have to address that.
That's really interesting. I think that's really, really cool. And I think you're hitting on a really great point of, being able to pull out from Frank's, am I safe? Because that is what it is. It's when people have uncertainty, the question they're asking themselves is like, this is my sole source of income. Like, is my family going to be okay?
Right.
And, if not, like, this is a tough job market. I might be a little concerned. This is, and also you can't lie to your people either. And I'm never an advocate of any organization saying, we're never going to do layoffs. It's like, stop talking. That's
Yeah.
BS. Like, you literally can't say that because you have no idea what's going to happen in the future. Layoffs happen, unfortunately, for better or for worse. Like, unfortunately, like it's sometimes like the economy shifts. And so if someone is blindly throwing all their eggs in your basket and be like, hey, you told me we'd never do layoffs. Like, therefore, I'm just gonna just keep bumping around and not paying attention to anything going on outside my work. You know, you put yourself into a tough position there. Yeah, go ahead, Frank.
I think you say this. There's never going to be layoff. I still remember when we have our town halls, and we talk about exactly that particular topic, and we're saying we have no intentions to do that, but still the underlying fear is still there. And I have found also that team members around the globe are we're putting them through a lot of initiatives, right? Rightfully so, and we put a name behind our initiative. We're explaining the whys. But when a strategy change occurs, it's like sort of the perception is, oh, this is going to be another one of those initiatives. Is it actually going to work? And I have found that small successes really help to contribute to driving change in a more enthusiastic kind of way and fashion, right? So break it down to the most common denominator and think about, what is it out of all the change, which can be uncomfortable, what are the pieces that make things a little bit better? Like an old piece of software we could never change, and you now move into an environment where you can more freely apply AI as an example, or you can adopt a tool that can improve a tool that makes life of people easier. And then you actually roll it out sometimes in a very short period of time when you see the immediate effects in making your work life easier, servicing customers easier. And I found celebrating small successes, making that really clear, bringing people along on the journey is somewhat diminishing the fear. It's never going to go away, will always be there, but it will help. It will help the leaders and the change makers in the organization to have a smoother transition.
We've seen that. We've seen that when we roll out robotic process automation initiatives, where the folks that had been depended on to do a form of data entry start to realize that, wow, this is taking over my job. And what we realize, what we've had to explain is that, okay, but your team doesn't have the capacity to fulfill our business goals. Like, we have to do this. And then we specifically talk to them about their responsibility is to monitor quality of the initiative. So that we still need you. You're here to hold the bots accountable, if you will. Like, you're still responsible for quality. And we tie, at least I recommend to the organizations, that they still tie compensation to total output of the initiative. So they start to realize somewhere in the middle that, wow, with this new automation, I can move so much quicker and I'm compensated on total output or the success of not just me, but me working with the automation. And the business still depends on me. And it just turns into this really cool culture of they're super happy to give feedback. Like they want to tell us all the things that the bot is doing wrong. And then they start to see how it's accelerating and that they can start to think more strategically or work on other things. So yeah, we've seen that. That's my story time anecdote here, is that we just see that in all these automation initiatives where there's this initial threat, but then this symbiosis starts to kick in.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because even when you deliver a change that has been asked for, the humans involved still are resisted on some level because it's coming back to the basic human needs of safety, security. How does this impact me? And the theme in what you all are sharing is meeting people where they're at, answering those tough questions, not lying about those tough questions, but answering those tough questions and helping them along that journey. And I think that's one of the critical things that we often forget as we put together the great slide decks and the great talk tracks. The humans involved have to come on that journey with you. And it's a lot messier in the moment with the humans than it is in a boardroom where you're planning it out. Again, a critical element is involving the people who are being impacted because they can help you make that change more appealing to their peers as opposed to in a top-down kind of you will, mandate this.
You both have just sort of referenced multiple times now the feedback mechanism, right? The feedback upward mechanism, and in that context, really empowering and engaging with your people at all levels, but in particular, sort of mid-management, where you have a tremendous opportunity to translate that strategy into the operational reality. You just sort of talked about this earlier, Ben. What does that thing actually do? What does the bot do? Does it help me? And you create less resistance by having people engaging early on in that process, in the decision-making process, but then also in the execution, and then give them the tools at their discretion to then basically do that feedback mechanism and say, hey, look, you just saved 20% of your administrative time. Doesn't that give you more time to work on the cool things that you may have not had time to focus on? And how positively does that affect your customers, your relationships with your customers and otherwise? And can't you now go home earlier, maybe an hour earlier, rather than sitting at your desk until 7 o'clock, right? So those things are all happen in combination. And feedback mechanism, allowing that feedback to come up, not being afraid of the questions that you get at town halls and otherwise, I think is an important mechanism to make that strategic change a better or a more homogeneous process.
Well, Deborah, you brought up a really interesting point earlier about like leaders broadcast but don't do the work. A story that immediately came to mind, one of our executives earlier this year that was on one of our panels, large software company, updated their pricing model from like a pay-as-you-go type of model, which was pretty receptive to their customer base. Their customer base seemed to enjoy it. They were fine with paying it because like it was a pay-as-you-go. So it's like, cool, I can justify paying for said thing because I use said thing. And they then transition to keeping the pay as you go, but also adding a fixed upfront fee for what their services offered. And this was a pretty commoditized space. It wasn't like they were the only player in the space. And they adopted this model. It was like as if they had never spoken to a single product manager in the entire decision. It was just like, hey, our revenues need to be higher. We should charge a fixed rate for what we offer on top of our pay-as-you-go model. And, we should be good. Well, what happens? Their clients left, like couldn't have left faster, like rushed out the door. They ended up having to do pretty wide scale layoffs. And then, of course, they removed the fixed pricing model and they're back to the pay as you go and they're recovering. But like, that's a perfect example of like when you said, leaders broadcasting, but not being on the ground floor because they wanted to drive higher revenue, but not actually talking to people like, hey, what do our customers want? How do we think they're going to react? It was like, obviously they had not tested this out or tested it out thoroughly enough because they immediately well, not immediately, after a year reverted it and many, many layoffs reverted it. But it makes you wonder, like, how do you get to that point? Like, how do you have such a blunder?
Uh,
Is
hey,
it,
Gar-
yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
I was just saying, like, this is an interesting topic because it happens all the time, right? The leadership team has a particular opinion about the change in the model, be it the operating model, the pricing model, or otherwise. It may even be driven by other influences. Could be the board, could be external influences, could be the competition, whatever. If it's right or wrong, let's set that aside for the moment. But the organization is forced to basically drive that change, and that happens, right? And sometimes the organization is wrong. I think it's important to note that not all strategic decisions will always lead to a fantastic outcome. And sometimes you have to learn the lessons from that. And some of them will be, maybe I should have communicated in a different way to my audience or to my customers. Maybe I should have not let my business model or my conviction that a particular pricing model is more compelling or more financially rewarding over maybe sort of the acceptance in the marketplace, or maybe the timing of it, right? Change is imminent and change is important, but maybe the timing of it or the way how you do it, flashcard versus over a period of time, bringing somebody along the journey. I think those learnings in a large scale, small scale, any organization is important because it sort of is the continuous evolution of how you do this stuff better on the go forward. But it's a very interesting topic, not disagreeing with you. I think you raised a very interesting point. Sometimes you're forced to do it. Maybe some people know maybe not the right thing to do, but you have to go through it for them to acknowledge, recognize, and then adjust your operating model.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because oftentimes we assume in leadership we have to get there through one path. And when you bring the people into the conversation, like if you say, this is what we need to accomplish, this is the ultimate end goal, you bring enough voices into the conversation that are on the ground and actually understand what's happening out there. They will not only show you what won't work, but they'll bring to bear solutions that you may not have ever thought about.
Yeah.
One of the things I think as leaders that we get stuck on is like, we have to have all the answers. Actually, no, we need to ask the right questions and get the right people in the room to pull out the right answers or the best possible answers based on where we're at in the moment. You're never going to have perfect information. But to reduce the likelihood that something blows up like what Garrett was just describing, and believe me, I've been in those situations, you have to involve the right people in the conversation to ensure that you mitigate the potential risk. If there's literally, if you're being mandated by the board that this will happen, then the best thing that you can do is work with the team who's closest to it to understand what's going to happen and lay out the best path to get there.
I agree to a point. I think a lot of times as leaders, we don't fully flesh out the strategy. And then we're asking our team, this happens when we haven't figured out a role, and maybe I'm just thinking about my small business friends where they may not have the industry expert working for them. They may have an up and comer, somebody with a little less experience that's still learning the ropes. And so if you don't have the strategy as a leader a little bit fleshed out, if you haven't figured out the role, and then you're saying, okay, this happens in sales all the time. I just want you to go sell, but you haven't done the work around the messaging and the product and the pricing. And so you're asking them to do a level of innovation and invention that they may not have the experience to do. And so I definitely think as leaders, we should be fleshing out the intention, like you said, to a high enough fidelity that our team can start to contribute rather than saying, hey, this is my pie in the sky idea. And that can be very disruptive. I find that sometimes I can be I call it, I can have a Howard Hughes moment where I want this great grand thing. And they're just like, yeah, but I don't know where to start. And quite frankly, either do I. So I think as leaders, we got to flush that out a little bit and really take that time to think through the strategy so that we're not, because it can be very disrupting as a leader to have, to thrust your ideas upon folks and not give them a place to start, not give them at least what success really looks like, or give them a strategy.
Gosh, I love that you brought up. All these points are so good. I'm like thinking to myself, God, I can relate to all these points. First off, I love, fleshing out the strategy and the experiment. I think what I think we're all kind of alluding to is the power of transparency, that this is in fact an experiment. At the end of the day, we're all mad scientists. Like, we're trying to figure it out. Like, we got a little beaker, we got a little thing. Instead of it, like, working with chemicals and things on the periodic table, it's with people and with strategy and with pricing and with whatever. We're all experimenters. We're all scientists. And I think the issue that a lot of executives, and we're kind of all alluding to here, especially if we have like a board involved or a relatively large company. And Ben, I think you brought this up earlier, is we sell the board on lagging indicators, not leading indicators. So we say, oh, board, we're going to go in this direction and we're going to increase revenue by this much percentage. And the board's like, great, looking forward to seeing these increased revenue numbers. Well, you can pretty quickly test out in a month or two, like, we might not be going in the right direction. But you oftentimes see organizations stick to their guns to this bad failing strategy for way too long because they sold the board on it, but they did not sell them on a pivot. And like in an experiment, it's like, cool. Maybe instead of having the beaker or the heating source on the bottom, maybe we need to have it on the side. I'm metaphorically keeping this scientific experiment going. But the point I'm getting at here is that like it seems like there's really big opportunities for executive teams to communicate up to the board and down to their teams the fact that this is in fact an experiment. We could be wrong, and we might pivot or iterate or try something different along the ways. And Ben, I love that you bring up sales teams because I think, just my own little diatribe on sales is I see this happening for so many organizations. They're like, we're going to test out a new market. We've never sold to it, but we're going to put you all in this and go ahead and figure it out. That is super hard. If you don't have a track record for sales, like charting a new territory is really, really difficult. Like we don't have William and Clark over here to go and like pave down this new demographic that we can go off. It's really hard to it's really hard to find our own William and Clark to go out and pave a new territory. So like be mindful that especially when it comes to sales, I think to ask a group of people or an individual to like make something happen and have some expectations for them is it's super hard. It's almost impossible.
Right.
I totally agree. I think an important element of all of this is as well, strategy is not a project. It's just not something that, it starts and it finishes. It's more or less a new way of working, right? And it requires ongoing conversation. I mean, if you want to be an Olympic athlete and you want to win twice, your training methodologies are changing over the 8 years that you're training for the Olympics on your 2 rounds, right? Because you continuously evolve, your body evolves, the dynamics evolve, the environment in which you will compete will evolve. So you have to continuously reinvent yourself, and strategy is part of that. And it's the way how you evolve your ways of working and the way how you engage, how you go about a particular topic. So and then again, bringing people along the journey, explaining that, making them comfortable with it. I think that's a very important. Then strategy becomes a living piece, and that's ultimately the objective that you want to achieve.
Yeah, one thing that we've done in our management team is that each manager has their set of quarterly goals, but they also have a CCE, a continuous concentrated effort. So this is something that's a little, we know it's going to take some, Hermosi calls it manager time versus maker time. Manager time being, a bunch of 30-minute meetings to manage a bunch of groups of people. Maker time being these larger blocks of time where you're fully fleshing out an idea that that if you're focused on the right thing, it should give you a lot of leverage in the future. And so I encourage every one of my leaders to not only have their goals, and a lot of those things can be SMART goals around their specific departmental objectives, but to also have a CCE, something that you're trying to discover, and something that may be a little squishier, but you're going to come back. You're going to come back from the quarter with a body of work that's meaningful. And I don't think we talk about that enough. This difference between manager time or shorter interval time blocks that are still very productive versus this longer time, because developing that strategy takes that continuous concentrated effort. It's not something you can do in a 30-minute meeting.
I totally agree. The other element of that is the accessibility of managers for having those conversations, right? Often you hear like, "Oh, you guys are, cruising up in the tower and you're never available." I think you really have to make sure that you are staying connected, that you do have the water cooler conversation, that you walk the floor as we go back into the office, right? As you make a trip to the regions out and speak to the people, so they feel actually close and connected. You don't want to be that leader that feels sort of, in the ivory tower or not being connected. I think you need to make a conscious effort to achieve what you just outlined, to be really connected to the people. They are comfortable in speaking up. And when they see you on Teams and you're green and they want to connect to you, yeah, absolutely. You pick up the phone and you make that happen. That trickles down, right? There's the multiplier effect. If people get that feeling that you are accessible, that you actually are in the change, you're participating, that makes it much easier. So the human element is incredibly important.
All right, there's too much agreement here. I'm gonna have to bring up a little devil's advocate. Frank, earlier you brought up this concept of, we have to be aware of the effects on people. We have to bring people along. We have to explain the why. This is me playing devil's advocate a little bit here. Whose why? The company's why or the individual's why? Because I think to myself, like, hey, if we could, make this change, we'll increase our EBITDA by XYZ%, and that'll position us well for our upcoming quarterly financial report and blah, blah, blah. If I'm an employee on the ground floor, I don't give a hoot about any of that. Like that doesn't
Yes.
impact me whatsoever. I don't care about you meeting some EBITDA or quarterly financial number. This means nothing to me. And so when you say explaining the why, whose why is it, and
That,
how do you go about
that
defining that based on
yeah,
the
that's
individual
that's
person?
an excellent question. And this is a very easy one for me at least to talk about. I come from a place where KPIs have been driving the business, like there were 30, 40 KPIs, right? To the degree where it almost becomes confusing as to what should you be looking at to actually drive the business forward. And what I have found is financial metrics are important, and the whys behind you need to make a change to your operating model to drive a bigger evaluation of your business is an important aspect. To what extent that is important for the people on the ground? Question mark. And I'll say I differ to some extent. I think there are financial metrics that you have to have, that you need to report to the board, and that you have to keep an eye on. Some of those, a few of those, are important for the team to understand. But most importantly, it is to understand, are we growing? Are we getting new customers? You know, are they happy? Is the customer satisfaction that they have? Are they happy with you who services them? You know, are they generally believe that this is a great brand that they have engaged with as a customer, as a vendor, as a partner, as a strategic partner? Those are important KPIs that I feel organizations forget sometimes a little bit about. You know, how many new customers have we acquired? How happy have the existing customers been? How many more products have we sold to our team members? Those are all somewhat related to your financial successes, but it's stuff that people can more relate to because that's what they do on a daily basis. Or when they onboard a new customer, has that been a great experience? Was it faster than we've done it before? Have these guys been up and running more effectively? Have they generated more business? I think those are the kinds of cool things, the great stories, the customer feedback stories that you share. And that's the why. We're doing this because we are servicing our customers in a better way and fashion. We can drive more business for them. We can create better successes. We can differentiate because of that us from the competition while we're continuously monitoring our financial success that we need to report to the board and where we get more money to invest into the business. That would be my answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Deborah.
Go ahead, Ben. Go ahead, Ben.
Well, we think about whenever we're rolling out something new, what I like to think about is what is my primary aim? And then I look at a rubric of, is this for me or for you? And then there's a rubric, right? So there's for you, for me, for me, for me, for you. And so who is this really for? So as we rolled out our certification system, because we want to have as many certifications as we can, we answered all of those questions. How is this for you? And how is this for us? And what are those kind of like combining factors? And just thinking through that was helpful. If I had gone out and said, I want you to all get certified so that your careers will be wonderful, I wouldn't have, they would have detected the what's in it for me. So I wanted to address that, right? We want to improve our AWS standing, our certification standing, so that we're a more experienced and have more expertise that's objective that we can measure KPIs against. But it's for you because it will improve your career. And we had to kind of address both of those points in our delivery so that it was clear that, yes, this does have a corporate benefit, but it also, there's something in it for you. And then that's where spot bonuses came in, and we improved our program in that way because we want to make sure that we speak both sides. We don't just try to sell it as a pure benefit to only them when there's something in it for us as well.
Yeah, I think I very much agree. I don't know if you were trying to get us to disagree, Garrett, but I'm of the mindset that one, you have to know your audience. So the message that you share has to be based on what's relevant to the individual audience. The board doesn't have the same interest as a frontline employee, but we would be remiss as leaders if we didn't teach our team members how the business runs and understand the connection between what benefits me and what benefits the company, because then you arm everybody in the business with the ability to get aligned around and rally around top level objectives and understand that if you're doing it right, you're aligning what they're working on to the company being successful. The company being successful provides more opportunities for people in most cases. Yes, there are pivots and strategic changes, but by and large, the team members benefit when the company is successful. So if they know what drives that success, they have a better ability to rally around those objectives and to contribute in identifying areas that you may not be seeing yourself as a leader initially, where things may be going off track. So you've got them all rowing in the same direction and you're all working toward the same objectives. It does have different relevance depending on the individual and where they sit in the organization, but they need to understand the business system and how it all fits together.
I like it. The sentence I wrote that I feel like brought all three of your answers together is aligning on the problem to be solved. Like, if you don't have that, it's really hard to do that. And, Frank, before we went live here, you were asking Ben a question. You said, Ben, how do you go about getting large organizations to buy into making a technology change? There's just a lot of, whether that be hubris around the way that they've always done it, or, fear that, bringing in somebody from the outside could potentially tarnish or put their security at risk, or whatever fears that they have. All that screams to me is that there's not alignment on the problem to be solved. And so, the question, the final question, I know we're getting closer on time, but I do want to address this is how do we go about getting that alignment from everybody in the organization? How do we get people to align on a problem to be solved, even if that means that they have to take an ego hit, even if that means they have to eat a little bit of humble pie to recognize, like, dang, these people might be better at me than this.
I'll respond directly to it, and as you encourage controversy, you just got one right here. The word alignment. When I hear alignment, I get like when my dog sees a squirrel. The hair goes up and he gets all anxious. I don't believe that you have to drive alignment to the degree that everybody needs to agree with you. I think there has to be a common understanding as to why we're doing it, right? So the reasons as to why a strategic change is initiated needs to be clear. Not everybody needs to be aligned with the reason, but people need to understand, this is why we're doing it. Some people may 100% agree, some people may not 100% agree. And that's, for me as a leader, that's perfectly fine. And we rally behind the strategy, we execute, and I expect for everybody who is on that team to execute in accordance with that and give their best. But I think it's hard sometimes to achieve 100% alignment. That's, in my view, not possible, and also maybe not necessarily desired.
Yeah, I think some of the highest functioning teams I've ever been on have been teams that argued really well from their chair, from their perspective, because many decisions are going to be hard on your people leader, or hard on your sales leader, or hard on the person who's driving supply for the new thing that you want to offer. So I love that, Frank, because you need a team that's going to argue to the best solution. And then once that decision is made, if that's what we're calling alignment, it's the decision that's made in the room while I might not agree, or it may be hard on me to agree, that we're going to go forward with the collective decision that was made. I'm not going to hold my resistance and sabotage the outcome. But at the same time, I'm sure going to make everybody aware that that this is going to be a challenge. And so, yeah, I think that's very interesting. Alignment is not the normal experience; it's the result of quite a bit of disagreement and wrestling with the right plan.
Yeah. I mean, I'm obviously I'm not a native English speaker, and so wordsmithing is always difficult for me. But what is really alignment, right? And you can argue about those things in many different ways and levels and categories. It's sort of the organizational altitude at which you hit, some of those points, right? So we were talking earlier also about that goes in the same bracket, you know, the misperception about leaders, right? I'm doing the strategy and then I have people who execute. You have to be uh, flying through the organization at different levels. Your involvement at different levels is slightly different. In some cases, you are more of an observer or you shadow people. In other areas, you are more a driver, or you are the translator of the strategy. So you're explaining it. You're driving alignment to a certain degree. You encourage buy-in, but then you run. And then as you go along, you gotta do that right. I've worked in organizations in the past where people have explored strategies to the degree of the competition moved already ahead by the time we determined that the strategy was a good strategy, right? So you have to accept that not everything is perfect. At some point in time, if your strategic direction is directionally accurate, you got to go. You have to bring the organization along those lines and drive as much alignment as you can.
Yeah, that's it. For me, that's disagree and commit, especially among an executive team. Like you battle it out respectfully, but you get all of the points of view out there. Whatever is decided is what you go hard at. So for me, alignment, it includes the disagree and commit. Like if this is what we've decided that we're going to do organizationally, I'm gonna I'm gonna die on the field trying to get it there, even if I disagreed with it, because that's your job as a leader, is to make that happen. The time for disagreement occurs at a certain point, but then you disagree and commit and move forward.
I think I love that. I love that statement. I borrow that statement, Deborah, and I'm borrowing it because for the following reasons. Sometimes leaders, business leaders, are of the opinion that if you are not aligned or you disagree, you're not committing. That's not the case, right? There's organizations who encourage you to speak up until you speak up, and then you get put down, right? Or you get like put into the corner, but everybody wants you to speak up. Well, if you want me to speak up, you have to accept that I am freely sharing my opinions. Doesn't mean that I'm not aligned, but I would have probably approached it a little different. But we'll be doing this, and I'm 100% committed, and so is my team. I think that's a great phrase. Disagree and commit. It's a really cool phrase.
I love it. Well, Deborah, Frank, Ben, this has been a great pre-symposium panel. If you're watching this and you're thinking to yourself, I want to meet these three great leaders, come to our executive symposium on December 4th, 5 to 8 p.m. We'll be discussing this topic in depth, and we're going to have a great time. Anyways, Deborah, Frank, Ben, thanks for being here for this